up on Mountain Hermeneutics. Doubt. Is that a normal thing for a Christian? And if you do have doubt, do you even Christian, bro? We're going to talk about that coming up. So keep it right here. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the divine council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck.
Now, I want to clarify that I was only arguing this theoretical, quasi-theoretical situation with Mr. Metcalf. I'm petty as shit. So I wasn't sitting here acting like I would be the same, because I would not.
So unprofessional. You'll edit this out, right?
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see how generous I'm feeling.
Mount Hermeneutics is free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube, simply by searching for Mount Hermeneutics. And if it's your first time with us, I am Andre. That's Matt. That's Brian. Fellas, what's happening?
Howdy.
Gentlemen.
Nice.
How we been?
All right. All right.
It's been okay. Okay. I mean,
What do you think? Good.
I have three granddaughters. They're fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aubrey is learning that pushing a toddler on a swing while holding a baby is like full on mom mode. She's like, I'm a whole ass mom.
She is.
so that's fun.
Yeah. Alyssa is learning that infants don't understand sleep patterns, and you have to teach it to them. And so it's been interesting.
There's a thing called sleep training, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. They have like specialists that'll come to your house and
that's lame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just TikTok it or something.
Right. So it's been,
that's what kids are doing.
We've been trying to help her. It's been interesting. She's struggling. She's learning. It's hard.
Oh, remember being young parents?
I don't like,
because it was so long ago.
It's two parts. One, it was so long ago, and Carrie did it all.
Right. Yeah.
Like I was basically Archie Bunker as a dad, right? Like,
yeah.
Carrie did all the mom stuff. So,
So you just sat on your recliner and said racist stuff all day.
I mean, same thing I do now as a grandfather.
I was at a friend's house who he made a brisket. Pretty good, by the way.
It's probably all right.
No, it was good. I know the difference. Why I keep doubting like my it was pretty good. I would bring it to a party and say my friend made this.
Nice.
And claim it. That's how good it is.
Nice.
Made a Cajun mac and cheese, pretty decent. Not bad.
I like that.
He's the guy that maybe one day wants to start a food truck. So he takes his shit seriously. And he's like, hey, I tried a new thing with my brisket today. I'm not happy with it, but I want you to try it. I'm like, that's pretty good. He's like, no, fuck that. It's not.
Yeah, that's okay. If he's that self-critical, then I believe he makes good brisket. Because only people that are really critical of their own brisket actually make good brisket.
In fact, we were in his garage, and his buddy that's over, he's thinking about like, I'm thinking about buying a green egg. He's like, don't buy that.
It's trash.
And it was funny because they're like, well, you don't like green? You have something against green egg? He's like, no, it's just hard to keep at the right temperature, and you're not ready for that.
It's like the temperature of Hiroshima inside of a green egg.
He's like you don't rate. That's why you can't have a green egg. Start on something else, okay? And I was like, that's so funny. He's like, no, don't do that. You're gonna mess up all. You're not gonna. Then you're gonna stop grilling, and you're gonna hate it. Like, don't do that.
It's like when somebody goes to the gym for the first time, you're like, hey, don't do a leg workout for your first time in the gym. Like don't go in there and go ham and do all that, because you won't walk for 3 days. You're never gonna come back to the gym.
Right. And I'm gonna make fun of you.
Is that a thing people do? They lead with leg day?
Well, they lead with like insane workouts, or they go get the trainer to give them a run through, and then the trainer like tortures them, and then they go home and they have more pain than they've ever felt in their life, and then they're like, that's terrible. And yeah,
it's actually not good for me because of the injury outweighs the gains. So first of all,
weak. Second of all, shut up. Weak. Weak.
But yeah. Yeah,
But yeah, that was good. It's fun.
cool. Yeah, I don't have a lot going on this last weekend. We kind of just hung out. Just kind of was a relaxed weekend.
Layla had a dance recital. It was Disney themed. Her little group were dressed like Jasmine. They sang A Whole New World and did some ballet.
Okay.
It was about what you expect from an MCCS program in an MCCS movie theater with children ballet dancing.
MCCS.
Marine Corps.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the PX, if you will.
Yeah.
The mafia that steal from you. They're terrible people. And if you're watching this MCCS, F you. So,
Yeah.
I mean, for example, we put on a fundraising softball tournament on Marine Corps Base Hawaii. And because we were trying to be legit, we went through MCCS because you have to like reserve the field and whatnot. We were charging teams like $1,000 to play in the tournament, like per team. And MCCS like, okay, so what's the percentage the MCCS takes? And their answer was 100%.
For what? Protection?
You take 100% of the fees, and we're allowed to sell merch and food and stuff. So we're like, oh, in that case, it's a free tournament with teams giving donations to our cause.
Well, you should have said it's a free tournament and you have to buy $100 shirts to wear.
Yeah, so, the whole team.
So, yeah, everybody, your jerseys, you buy them from us. They're $100 a person.
Yeah, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And they're the reason why you can't have a gi dunk or a mess in your office.
Seriously.
Yeah, because it takes from them. If I buy a candy bar from my office, I'm not going to go to the PX and buy one.
Except we went to the PX to buy them so that we can sell them in the office.
I remember we had a mess at the radio battalion detachment in Hawaii, and that got shut down
because of that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
We did keep them in the skiff because the
MCCS can't come in the skiff because they're not.
Now the thing is, you don't buy them at MCCS when you start a mess, right? You go to Costco or Sam's Club, you buy it in bulk, and that way you actually make profit. Yeah. But that's how we paid for Marine Corps balls.
Yeah,
you can't just go do. They'll take portions of your car wash if you do it on MCCS facility.
Yeah, we had like a little like underground prohibition bootleg soda mess going on.
Yeah, you have to.
I don't drink soda, so I didn't care or take part, and I'm innocent of all wrongdoing. And
so what we would do?
Statute of limitations for the MCCS has not expired,
or
it never expires.
Outside the bay, they'll put a vending machine there so that you don't have a mess.
Yeah, we had that, and we had a mess. We just
that's crazy.
We just try not to get caught.
It was funny because we expected them to rob us, right? We're like, okay, so what's the percentage?
They're gonna take 50%, 60%.
They're like 100%, and
100% that's diabolical.
Like, then we're not doing it. What the hell's wrong with you? We're inviting like local teams from out in town, bringing them on base. And because they're on base, they're going to all the facilities here and spending money on your bait. Like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, that's nuts.
You got to be joking.
That would make me lose faith in the Marine Corps.
Kind of like, doubt setting in.
I start wondering, does the Marine Corps even care about its Marines? Like, why?
I was trying to think of a gentle way to steer it back, but Dre beat me to it.
Yeah. So it's like I had you learn all of the Marine Corps lore and you buy into it, and then you have a colonel tell you that Chesty Puller, the reason he never got his Medal of Honor was because headquarters Marine Corps knew he was trying to get a Medal of Honor, and so they wouldn't give him one. And then you're like, well, wait, if Chesty Puller's not the greatest Marine of all time, do I believe in the Marine Corps? Like, who have I been saying good night to all this time? Like, who am I?
Huh.
And then doubt sets in, and then you're
Well,
like,
now we all
maybe I
hail
should have just joined the army.
Saint Mattis. That's that's who it is now. Mattis is the modern day Chesty.
Yeah, but he's got a lisp, and he never married. It's
He
kind
did
of
punch me,
he's kind of sus.
and he doesn't hit that
So,
hard. By the
so
way,
what are you saying exactly, Matt?
that he's kind of like Carl Anthony Towns of the Marine Corps. That's what
He's kind of
sus.
he's kind of zesty.
Yes, that's the general. And maybe that's why he bombed the shit out of people because he was just mad
He got a
at
lot of
all the
latent he got a lot of latent angst going on.
and
Hmm.
he a lot of Middle East countries, a little homophobia going on over there. Just saying, like
He's flexing.
created glass parking lots, lots of places.
This is not the show I thought we were going to do.
So why don't you start us off, Brian? What's
Uh, yeah. So I'm trying to kind of recover the headspace I was in when I had
just
the,
called one of the greatest Marines in modern time, Zesty.
I mean,
And
I said what I said.
yeah. So
it's probably why Trump fired him. He's like, I thought you were manlier. I thought I thought you'd be bigger. Talk to
yeah.
me, Brian. Let's talk about doubt.
I'm trying to recover
Instead
the headspace I was in
of
when I,
doubting the size of the greatest general in modern times,
yeah.
a modern major
I
general.
mean, I'll start us off. So I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but I had my pastor when I was in high school, and he
This
brought up
restaurant is located at.
doubt one time in a service, and he just basically said, you know, I know there's Christians that they struggle, you have doubt, things creep in, you're trying to resolve issues, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, it seems like Christians are conditioned to think that doubt is the devil, and that if you doubt your salvation, that's Satan, you know, clawing at you. He goes, but here's my take. If you were to doubt something about Jesus, God, your salvation, the Bible, Christianity, and you dig into it and you ask questions and you work through it, your faith is going to be stronger on the other side of that journey, of that exercise. And had you not dug into it and you were afraid to doubt and you languished with suboptimal theology, that's actually where evil wins, right? Is to be too afraid to dig in and be self-critical, or to read the Bible critically, or to you know, to dig in. And oh, by the way, if your faith can't hold up to critical thinking, you probably really didn't have faith to begin with. And he said this in a service, and I was like, that might be one of the ballsiest things I've ever heard a pastor say
He's just
openly.
dropping bars.
And I loved every bit of it. And it probably colored a lot of my, I shouldn't say probably, it certainly colored a lot of my early approaches to the Bible. And it's probably why I've, you know, entertained and chewed through different ideas. And it's absolutely large part of why I'm sitting here right this second with you two gentlemen doing this podcast.
Hmm.
For right or wrong, right? Like maybe he was wrong and I'm wrong, and you know, uh-oh. But I don't think so.
Something about that. I don't I don't know. I don't think that I wouldn't say that I disagree with him. I would say that that scenario, like I think it's, well, let me I'll circle back to that. because I want to set this up correctly so I'm not misunderstood. Well, as you guys know, I thought of this topic idea. Sometimes I'll be praying, I'll be reaching out to God in my thoughts and my and trying to address the words of my prayers to Him, and I'm just kind of it's not something that happens often, but it happens sometimes where I'm just kind of like, what does that even mean? What do I even mean by God? And
Mm-hmm.
I think of God as He's the creator of the universe, and the universe is vast and unfathomably huge. What does that even mean, that God is the creator of the universe? This consciousness who exists, who precedes all space and time and matter and energy, and created the entire universe out of nothing. What does that even mean? And then it just, what am I, do I really believe all this stuff about watchers and giants and angels and resurrections and messiahs and prophecy? And then I start thinking about like my own life, like how I've, this is what I base my life on. This is my identity. These are the things that I think about all the time, and I'm just kind of like, what are you thinking? Do you like what is that, like, how do you buy all this stuff? And I'm kind of seeing myself from the perspective of like the Richard Dawkinses of the world and the Sam Harrises, who just think that Christianity should be held up to utter ridicule. And I'm kind of like seeing it from their perspective. Um, and then I'm just kind of like, you know, and it's hard to explain. I'm trying to recreate the headspace that I'm in these moments. Um, so people can kind of, see if anybody else can relate to that. But anyway, can you relate to that? Is that something that you guys ever go through, or?
So for me, it's different. I would say, yeah, broadly, yes. I don't necessarily doubt it in the metaphysical sense. What I find myself struggling with is I'll be in church, I'll see a reel on my phone, and it'll be this like, random biblical quote. And I'll find myself saying, "Do I believe that?" Right? Like the quote itself. I I I I don't know if I find it easier, or my brain, or the way that my doubt works is it's a lot easier for me. And I think some of this, Brian, could be, being raised a Christian versus someone like yourself coming to it at a different time and they're later, much later in your life, right? Um, the idea of God existing was, I mean, the sky is blue, things fall down because of gravity. This, the sun's red, God exists, are kind of things that I was kind of just raised to accept. And so my brain doesn't ever really say, I mean, it has. I'm not saying it's never happened, but I find myself way more often being, doubtful of a specific verse and being
Hmm.
like, did he really say that? And not he, God, like John, whatever, like John, whatever the verse is. And I'm like, but did John say that? And is that what he meant? You know what I mean? Um, and
Hmm.
and then I fall into a weird place because then you spiral, and the spiral is fast, by the way, at least for me, because my brain will spin really quick, and it's like, well, if he didn't say that, then what about this, and what about that, and then right, the whole everything starts to like tilt, and I find my entire belief system kind of just like falling out from underneath me,
Hmm.
and it's an interesting thing to have happen. Um, I think it's certainly one of those things that I don't think Christians talk about. It's not like you come to church and you're like, "Oh man, I was doubting God the other day." Bro, me too. Right? Like I don't think that's a very common conversation starter, but I think if Christians were to be honest, I think it well, I would suggest it happens more often than people talk about. And I think for those that are actively chewing on it, it probably happens more often than those that don't think about it a lot. Because if you don't think about it a lot, you don't have many opportunities for it to
Well,
creep
I,
in.
I will say this. The Bible never really has anything good to say about doubt. Um, like it's not, it's like there's, you never really find a positive spin on it in the Bible. I'm trying to bring up,
Yeah.
there's a
Thomas
passage
wasn't
in,
considered one of the cooler guys,
yeah, I mean, Jesus rebuked him.
right?
That like, it wasn't like, hey, good on you for admitting your doubt, Thomas.
Hmm.
It was, you of little faith. Blessed because you've seen me, you believed. Blessed are those who who trust, who don't need to see to believe. Um,
But I think there's a fairness there, and I know you've brought up in past episodes that people just because somebody sees a miracle doesn't mean they believe it more.
right.
But I think Jesus being aggravated with Thomas when Thomas was there, I think from a humanistic point of view is kind of fair,
Yeah.
right? It's like, bro, did you not see me? Were you not there with me walking across the water? Because I feel like you were there,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, and Thomas had every reason he should have believed
Hmm.
is the point. And
Right,
he had seen Jesus raise the dead.
right.
Jesus had told him, I'm going to rise from the dead. They, and they didn't, and it's really interesting. I wrote several years ago, I wrote a harmony of all of the resurrection accounts in the New Testament,
Hmm.
and kind of like created this single narrative, starting with that just kind of combined them, and some interesting things emerge. Like Jesus wasn't planning to appear to the disciples in Jerusalem those two times on that, those several times on the first Easter Sunday. He told the angels told the women to, go and tell the disciples and Peter, because Peter had renounced him and wasn't, uh, being counted as a disciple there, which is an interesting detail. He is not here; he is risen. He will go ahead of you into Galilee. But the women were freaked out, and they told the disciples. The disciples didn't believe them, and so they didn't have any intention of going to Galilee. So when Jesus was appearing to them, it wasn't to reward their faith; it was to rebuke them for their lack of faith and tell them, "Hey, get your asses to Galilee."
Right.
Um, and so,
Wait, you mean Rocky wasn't like the best disciple at the time?
yeah, I mean, right, he
Weird,
technically wasn't a disciple, because
weird.
the the angel said, "Go and tell the disciples and
G-
Peter."
I feel like Jesus should have showed up with his hand out and been like, "Give me the keys."
Remember those
Well,
keys I gave you back on that rock?
according to the creed in 1 Corinthians 15, it says that he rose from the dead according to the scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, to Peter, and then to the 12.
Hmm.
And then in Luke, the pair on the road to Emmaus, they mentioned that he had appeared to Cephas. But we never get that account of his appearance to Peter. Um, like, as if Peter didn't tell anybody because he was so ashamed
Right.
of
It
what
wasn't
went
because
down.
he was the supreme chancellor or something. It was because he was the worst of them at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, weird that.
But regarding doubt,
That was a throwback. That was a callback, by the way, for the listeners,
to
in case
the
you didn't
to
figure
the
that
the
out.
Pope thing, he wasn't the Pontifex Maximus at the
Yeah.
time. So James wrote, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, to give generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do." So doubting is not a virtue. It's not something that is praised or encouraged, or so, like, it's understandable why Christians wouldn't advertise that they doubt. James says that he describes the person in terms of a boat on the sea that's being tossed around by waves and is unstable and basically in danger of capsizing. Um, and so the question is, what do you do about it when you have those doubts? When that and one of the components of that that when I have that experience of kind of reaching out to God to tr and I'm I'm confronted with the question of what does that mean? What is God? How does he even relate to the universe? And the idea of such a being even listening to my prayers. I'm just a bug on a rock in a void in this vast ocean of stars that he created. Um, and that whole cascading dominoes of reevaluating my life in light of this doubt. The thing that occurs to me is that, yeah, this is a spiritual attack by the devil. But then of course another doubt, well, who are you? Why would like why would the devil care about you? Like, you're nobody. What's the what why would he bother? And just like the whole, and so basically my whole life unravels in that moment, because because my faith in Jesus Christ is the basis of it. But then the anchor that I cling to in those moments of instability is Jesus Christ. It's the argument for the resurrection it is airtight. Um, the other arguments for God's existence, they are one of the factors that leads to the doubt is that I'm thinking about what God is. I'm trying to wrap my mind around. I'm trying to understand God. I'm treating God as something, as something that I can even comprehend, when the correct question is, who is God?
Why is God?
Well, but no, I'm not like,
Why is Gamora?
yeah, I get the reference. It's funny, but in all seriousness, you can't comprehend God. You
Right,
can't,
right.
as a what? God has revealed himself in history as a who, as the as and that who is the person of Jesus Christ. That's how you know God. And when I and it's really a momentary doubt, because that's kind of you have to train yourself to kind of cling to that anchor of your faith, the way that God has revealed himself in the world. And just thinking of Jesus Christ as a historical figure, even if you approach the question without any theological ideas, just philosophically neutral. um like an atheist would say that, well, the stories about the resurrection emerged because the disciples were so grief stricken that they
Hmm.
they were coping with the fact that their rabbi, who they loved so much and had so much hope for as the Messiah, he was crucified. And so they just kind of invented this in order to cope with that, which kind of, you know there's a deeper question behind that of, well, what was it about Jesus Christ that would, like, there have been all kinds of people who were, their followers thought they were the Messiah. Only this one was like, what was it about him that made him so beloved by his disciples? How does a mere mortal inspire that kind of devotion and love? There's really no parallel for that. I mean, Muhammad, his legacy lived on because he promised plunder and war booty and sex slaves for conquering in his name. And it's really just Islam is no different than really any other historic empire that continued after its first conqueror died. All of the rewards are obvious. It wasn't because they loved Muhammad so much. Muhammad became a figurehead to justify their pillaging and plunder and conquest. But there's no comparison to be made with Jesus Christ, who was beloved by his disciples and had a enough of a reputation that you could plausibly, if you don't look any deeper, that is, you could plausibly say he was so loved by his disciples that they made this up. But even that, that doesn't account for the data. That doesn't hold up to scrutiny. When you look at the data and evaluate it logically, it's a fact that he rose from the dead. It's there's no other logically permissible conclusion. And when you can, and just considering that, the history of the church, the history of the Jews, there's no explanation for these things but that God has revealed himself in history to humanity. And all of that is to say that the doubt is inevitable, but the antidote to it is to have that foundation in the factual truth of Christianity. There's a there's a quote from C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity, who wrote, "Now faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted, in spite of your changing moods. For moods will change whatever view your reason takes. I know that by experience. Now that I am a Christian, I do have moods in which the whole thing looks very improbable. When I was an atheist, I had moods in which Christianity looked terribly probable. This rebellion of your moods against your real self is going to come anyway. That is why faith is such a necessary virtue. Unless you teach your moods where they get off, you can never be either a sound Christian or even a sound atheist, but just a creature dithering to and fro, with its beliefs really dependent on the weather and the state of its digestion. Consequently, one man must train the habit of faith." So he sounds a lot like James there about the whole, like, Christians aren't the only ones who suffer from doubt and are like boats tossed on the sea. Um, Atheists have that too. They have these times when their atheism seems very unlikely, and Christianity is probably true.
It
Um,
makes me wonder what Bart Ehrman's inner monologue is like in his
yeah,
quiet moments, right? A person who was, for all intents and purposes, a fully, you know, saved individual, and doubt was able to overtake him, and now he's kind of he has to live in two worlds, right? Because he knows all of the things he knew before, but yet he's, struggling to be somewhere now.
yeah.
It's got to be an interesting concept.
And his
So,
whole story is highly suspicious, but I don't know if you want
so
to camp out on that, but
no,
it
I
sounds,
don't, I don't think so. Dre, like you're probably the most doubting person here, right? Like,
Yeah, and still do.
with
So,
regards to
yeah.
this, like, where do you land on all this?
Well, one of the things that strikes me about many like loud atheists and some of the ones that have converted from being an atheist to being devout is because they've tried so hard to disprove it and they couldn't. Right? So the more they dig, the more they find that it's correct. And maybe I'm on that path because my digging is deep. Um and it's and I think I come from a place that, or I'm settling in a space that 100% of the words do not have to be absolutely true and factual and in line on a timeline perfect for the overall concept or the overall narrative from Genesis to Revelation to be true. And I think that's where I quibble with some fundamentalists or Catholicism, where I do not believe that all of the scrolls slash books in our canon are inerrant. Now, does that mean that I go ahead and pick and choose what is correct and what is not? No, I don't think that's the case either. I think
It almost puts you in a more difficult position, right?
right,
It's
and I
it's easy.
don't.
Well,
It's easier to, karate yes or karate no, right? To say
Right,
I'm going to believe that all of these words were supernaturally put here, right? So that you buy it, you get it, you take
right,
all of it. And then there's over here, I don't believe any of it, and I think it's
right.
it's all BS, right? And then you find yourself somewhere where it's like, I think I believe most of it, but I think there's a couple of things that shouldn't be in here and maybe a couple of things that should, and I don't know what that means. And
I,
and to your point, if you're not doing it from a place of justification or self-indulgence, but you're doing it from a position of I just really want the truth. It's a strange location to find oneself in.
by the way, I reject inerrancy as a concept also.
Let's talk
Um,
about that. I think that's worth camping out on for sure. And I think
um,
we've talked about it here before, but I think for this episode, it's probably worth hitting.
well, I would say that I'm like I land in the same place that I think Christians I land where I think Christians mean when they say that. I affirm the divine authority of the Bible. I affirm that Genesis through Revelation, every one of those books is inspired by God, belongs in the canon, and is useful for teaching, rebuking,
66
etc.,
or
etc.
72 books.
66.
And I'm not trying to
Um,
be funny like that. That matters.
yeah. I mean, and this that's not something I care to. I don't think it matters
I,
for
I
this
want to
purpose
clarify
for
that for anybody that doesn't know what I'm talking about, just in case we have new listeners.
Catholic
So
Bible
the,
versus
the Catholic,
Protestant
yeah, the
Bible.
Catholic Bible, I believe it's called the
The
Deuterocanonical. What is it?
Deuterocanonical books.
Easy for you to say. Um, there's an extra six books in the Catholic Bible that don't exist in the Protestant Bible. Um,
Well, yeah,
there's not a well. It's just that's a fact. And essentially, with just to highly simplify it, Martin Luther took them out. Um,
I mean, this is,
Hyper simplification, like they
th-
came out during the Reformation,
I,
and
that's,
and it's relevant for one thing, I think, because
uh,
I brought this up the other a different conversation with a different group, and we were talking about the fact that Catholics believe in indulgences, which is the ability to buy your way out of sin. Um, it's in one of those
well,
six books.
out of purgatory.
It's in one of those six books, and that's
Yeah, it's,
that's why whenever I brought it up, people are like, "That's not in the Bible," and I was like, "Look, I'm just reporting the news, right? And it is in the Bible if you're Catholic." Um,
well, I don't remember. I think I think it's in Second Maccabees. I
mm-mm.
don't remember the
It's
exact
in it's
verse.
in I don't even remember the name of the book, like Eidos or Titus, or it's like a three
It's
four.
in, it's in Second Maccabees.
Okay. I
Um,
I looked up the verses, and there's two primary verses, and they're in a four or five letter book that I don't recognize because I don't
when
recognize the
when you read the actual verse they're basing it on, it's by a very I mean, well, first of all, I want to dispute your the historical representation. I don't Martin Luther didn't take them out, and the fact that they're called deuterocanonical, like if you unpackage that, it's Catholics themselves are tacitly acknowledging that these are of lesser importance than the main 66 books. But the specific verse that they base their defense of, it's not that those verses defend indulgences per se. The claim is that they defend purgatory, and it's a very strained interpretation. But I don't. But for the purposes of my discussion, like I'm happy to just, for the sake of argument, say, fine, there's 72 books in the Bible. Um, my point in saying that I reject inerrancy as a concept is that the Bible never presents itself on those terms. Like I think it's this, the term inerrancy, it's predicated on this very kind of simplistic child's crayon drawing idea of what divine inspiration means. That and I saw a video by Charlie Kirk where he's defending the Bible against some feral leftist campus activist, where he says that the 66 authors transcribed from God, which is not true. That's not how the Bible presents itself. Um, in First Peter, he says that the prophets they searched intently with the greatest care to find out the time and circumstances to which the Spirit of Christ pointed when he predicted the sufferings of Christ and the glories that would follow. Like there was a human element to it, but at the same time, he says no prophecy of Scripture came about with the prophet's own interpretation, but men spoke from God as they were carried along by the Holy Spirit. Um, but he's only talking about prophecy there as a genre. And then you have things like Luke, where he explicitly lays out, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us. And so I thought it proper to likewise present an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so you may be certain of the things that have been handed on to you by those who first were eyewitnesses. So he's telling us he investigated it. This is a work of human effort to collect eyewitness testimony for history, and that's kind of that's the Bible's first value, is as historical witness by eyewitnesses, by human eyewitnesses, but they're historical witnesses to God's intervention in the world. And so it comes with God's authority by hand-picked representatives of Jesus Christ and the prophets. But this idea that the thing is, when you ask somebody who is a proponent of inerrancy what they mean by that, and then you start pointing out that there are, if the standard is absolute and error-free perfection, well, you can find discrepancies between, different accounts in the Gospels of the same thing, where they can't both be inerrantly true.
Right, or even Deuteronomy and Leviticus, or uh, Kings and Chronicles. Like they
Right.
kind of retell the same story, yet
And there's like
from
one where like they mention like
right.
the wrong emperor at the wrong time frame or something like that. Like the
Sure.
dude
Well,
just got it wrong when he wrote it
to
down,
be
kind of
to
thing.
be honest, a lot of the discrepancies that skeptics point out, there is an amazing track record of proving them wrong, where it's not actually a contradiction. Like a lot like the thing about Quirinius's census. If you dig into that, that actually does track with history. But there's other stuff that's more like there's an episode after the Sermon on the Mount. There's an episode in which Jesus, a centurion servant, is sick and dying, and in one it happens after the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. It happens after the Sermon on the Plain in Luke. And the content of the Sermon on the Plain is like an abbreviated version of the Sermon on the Mount. So was that on the Mount or was it on a plain? Don't know. Some people have argued, well, there's this geographical
Yes,
feature in
there's
Galilee
both.
where there's like an elevated plain that's on top of a mountain, and that's where he did it. Fine. But what follows is, in one version, the centurion himself comes out to Jesus and pleads with him to heal his servant. And then he goes, "Sure, I'll go heal your servant." And the centurion stops him and says, "No, I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof, but I'm a man under authority. And I tell a servant, I myself am also a man under authority, and I tell my servant, go when he goes, and come when he comes. So I know that if you just pronounce him healed, he'll be healed." And then Jesus is amazed by his great faith. In the other version, the local Jewish elders come out and say, "Hey, this centurion built our synagogue. He's awesome. He
Mhm.
deserves for you to do this. Can you go do it?" And he says, "Yeah, right on. I'll go do it." And then they stop him and say, no, he didn't even consider himself worthy to come ask you this, but that's why he sent us. But he said, I'm a man under authority, etc. So I think the fact that you have those two versions means that that was an event that happened. That was a that's that these are two different eyewitnesses reporting their recollection of the same event where Jesus healed the centurion's servant or his son. But they can't both be true in the absolute
They can't be
sense.
literally true. They can be functionally true.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
functionally true, but
Yeah.
if your standard is this absolute inerrancy,
Letter for letter, word for
yeah,
word, perfection. Yeah.
well, one of those has to be wrong in the details, and the other
Yeah.
one right, or both of them are wrong in the
Well,
details.
it strikes me. I remember that I was taught this a long time ago, and I don't know what the Greek or Latin or whatever is behind it, but I've always heard pastors use the concept of biblically perfect, right? And that in the Bible, the concept of perfection is that the information was conveyed, the thing happened. It didn't have to be perfect, as in, you know, there was no
Yeah,
whoopses, there was no mistakes. Like it's kind of like, commander's intent. Build the temple. Well, that doesn't mean that when they built the temple, nobody stubbed a finger or smashed a toe or, dropped a board, or they didn't have to tear down a wall and put it back up again. But when they were done, it was perfect, right? Because it was built. The idea
yeah,
was put a
but
temple there and have it up by this time, and they did it.
I think that's moving the goalposts, though.
How so?
What I mean, as far as the people who insist on this concept of inerrancy, um, when you press them on these things, you'll find that they qualify their definition of inerrancy to the point that it's really meaningless. But the concept itself emerges from this idea that, well, if it's the word of God, if it's written by God, and you have these human authors who are merely transcribing it, but God is the ultimate direct author. Well, every single word should be perfect because he's God. He knows everything. He can't make a mistake definitionally. And so
What does it have to do with what I just said?
I'm getting there. The idea of inerrancy is rooted in this idea in which there can be no errors because it's God writing it. Um, but then when you start kind of excusing the errors on the basis, well, these were human authors writing history, so therefore we should cut them some slack. Well, you're not you have to let go of the concept of inerrancy if you're going to do that, because now you're acknowledging that, well, God didn't transcribe every word, and the Bible in fact doesn't even offer itself on those terms, but you're setting up this all or nothing impossible standard. So we need to, if we're going to make the concessions that you laid out, well, we need to adopt a different paradigm of what inspiration means. It doesn't mean God dictated it and the
I feel
human
like that's
authors
exactly what
transcribed
I
it.
said in the idea of perfection not meaning what we mean it to mean, what we interpret it to mean. That was exactly what I meant when I said that. That it was your point of the two stories of the centurion and Christ. The message is conveyed perfectly, irrespective of the nuances and the quibbles between the two
Yeah, and
different
I'm
versions.
not arguing with you. I'm trying.
Well, when I
I'm
when I when I used more words to explain, you said no, that's moving the goalposts. That's confusing
Well,
because it sounds like you're disagreeing with what I just said.
okay. What you just said was that some Christians offer this explanation.
No, no, that's not what I said. I said separately.
You
I've
said
had
they use the concept of biblical
no,
perfection.
no, you misunderstood what I said, or I didn't say it clearly. I said in a completely separate instance, I've had pastors explain that in the Bible, the idea of perfection has nothing to do with one for one bits being specific. It has to
Okay.
do with outcomes and the main idea being conveyed. So then one could use that concept of perfection and overlay it with our modern misinterpretation of inerrancy. That's what I was saying.
Okay. Well, and again, my point was not to argue against you. And perhaps I did misunderstand.
It's cool.
What
That's why I
what
was
I
like, I want to understand how I just moved the goalpost, because I thought we were saying the
what
same
I
thing.
thought you were saying, that when you said some pastors say this,
It was not about inerrancy. It had
right?
nothing to do with inerrancy.
My assumption was, well, they're pastors. They're trying to maintain
Yeah, no. Yeah. That's
this
not, yeah.
paradigm of inerrancy. If those pastors are saying, no, I don't agree with inerrancy because of this, then I agree with them.
Yeah.
Well,
I've heard plenty of pastors though who make the argument, and I'm not laying this at your feet or even the pastors you've talked to. I myself have known plenty of pastors who made the same arguments you made in service to their idea of inerrancy. And I'm saying, well, you need to get rid of you need to abandon this idea of inerrancy and redefine your idea of what inspiration means. And this is, and I don't mean to, I don't want to belabor this, but this is very important to nail down because, you read Bart Ehrman's stuff. Um, if you read, what was it? I think it was Jesus Interrupted, one of his early works, where he's giving his sort of deconversion testimony about how he came up as a fundamentalist evangelical. He believed all the things. He was as gung ho, zealous, diehard Bible believing Christian as you can get. He went to Bible college, and he tells the story about how he was like in one of his tests with one of his professors, he was being asked to explain some discrepancy in between Mark and Matthew or some, I don't remember the specifics, but he tells the story of how like his deconversion, I'm sorry, he doesn't explicitly say his deconversion in this, but he's talking about his progress of realizing that this concept of inerrancy was misguided because one of his he's offering all of these explanations for try to reconcile these two contradictory passages from one gospel to another, and he and in a like an essay test, and his professor wrote back on the the graded test, or maybe Mark got it wrong, and he like that was a big turning point for him because he just like having strained out so many implausible explanations to try to preserve this idea of inerrancy, he he didn't believe those himself.
maybe Mark just got it wrong.
Yeah, he didn't believe those himself, but then the professor said that, and then it was just this, this cascading dominoes of realizing his life had been a lie because he was preserving, he was he was striving against all of the circumstances to preserve this concept of inerrancy on which his faith was based. Now,
I kind of feel bad for Bart.
well, in later interviews, when people like, people read that and they very naturally take it to mean this is how he lost his faith. So he's been questioned about that, and he says, no, 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 no. That's not why I lost my faith. The reason that I reject Christianity and God's existence is the problem of evil. Because he like I think, but if you read all of his
But
books,
one sets up the other, right? Like,
well, no, he denies that the
Okay.
inerrancy thing has anything to do with
Okay.
it. I agree with you.
That's even worse if it's just the problem of evil.
Well, I don't
He got
believe him.
hornswoggled by freaking Calvinists.
Honestly, I don't believe him. I think that is how it happened. But later on, after he made a name for himself and his bread got buttered for so long, telling atheists what they wanted to hear, now that's who he is. That's his identity. That's his livelihood. And
That's
but
a good
now
point. Yeah.
he's in his debates and interactions with Christians, he's probably been confronted with how utterly absurd that is to abandon faith in God through Jesus Christ because his ideas of inerrancy were shattered.
Right.
And so he falls back on, oh no, it's the problem of
It's
evil.
it's safer to fall back on the problem of evil because it's more understandable,
Right.
I guess.
Except that's still bankrupt because it's still
Yeah,
like
but he's in a pretty he's probably in a
it's a culturally defensible position,
well, and
but
it's
it's
also
not.
numerically defensible.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think we're saying the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the Lone Ranger, right? He's not sitting
No.
by himself. He's probably a huge, group of former Christians that the problem of evil, zapped him, and now they sit around and cry into their beers together. Dre, what
Which
were you
the
starting to say a
entire
second ago?
I was just gonna say, I mean, you guys said all of that in defense of the Bible, um, and that's not what I think at all. I think,
all right,
I think, yeah. I mean,
a third
I,
perspective. Let's hear it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think that you have people, scribes, priests who are using history to write theology. And so a lot of it is true and true events, but I mean I think and a lot of scripture is proved through other scripture. I have issue with that, but that's not
Can
my problem with with I just think that a lot of stuff is just straight wrong. But my answer to that is, so what? What is what is the end point, and what are we getting to, and what is the theology?
can you give an example of what's
Uh,
wrong?
I think the problem of evil is one, and I think we'll probably get super deep into this when we talk about why I'm not a Christian.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
I don't want to turn this into
yeah,
into
yeah,
that, but I guess so. What you're saying, just if
Well,
I could,
but the problem of evil is a widely cited justification for such doubt. And so that is worth addressing here, even if we don't do it conclusively or comprehensively. But
I think the problem of evil lies with men and not with God. And I think that the things that were said in the Old Testament about God were not true. So to me, Old Testament things where God said these things specifically, and some of it, King Saul, I don't believe that was said by God. I don't believe that God told him to destroy every man, woman, and child, and then punish him for not doing so.
well,
I just don't. So, and if there's a reason, or and we can do mental gymnastics on why that was said or how it was conveyed, then fine. But I believe, and I truly believe, if because ontologically that is not, it's a fallacy. If you are omnibenevolent, benevolent, then you did not say those things. And stop, full stop. And that's what I believe.
hmm.
So to me, to say that the Bible is inerrant, I said no. It's pretty errant.
so let me say this
Well,
differently though,
I,
Dre.
I
So
I do want to point out those aren't the kinds of things that I would regard as errors. I think if what Dre was saying was true, and I believe that, I wouldn't be a Christian.
well, so I don't think it's an error. That's the point, and I think that's kind of what if I follow Dre's direction, there's a difference between an error and a purposefully misstated fact.
For sure.
Errors are mistakes, right?
Or a misrepresentation,
A
not on
misrepresentation is
purpose.
purposeful, right? Like, yeah,
Right.
there's a
Yeah.
difference between you're doing an assignment and you did some research and you crossed a couple of your footnotes and you screw up and you give the wrong credit to the wrong quote or you put the wrong data in the wrong field. That's an error. If you purposefully like copy someone else's work and represent it as your own, that is not an
That's a
error.
lie.
Well, I think a
Right.
lot of that happened because there's lots of
And
sources, especially with the Old Testament.
yeah, and so I think what I'm hearing you say, Dre, is that you believe in the potential for the corruption of man to have infiltrated parts of the Bible.
100%. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Having said that, you still are in a position to think that the broadness of the message being conveyed is still solid. And that's why you're in a weird spot, because
Yeah,
you're
well,
not to the point that
yeah,
you're willing to
I
walk
do think it's
away
solid
from
for
it.
the example, the Saul thing, because the reason why he didn't, I mean, he made an excuse to say, "Oh, no, 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 I didn't kill the good cows because I'm sacrificing those to you. Why are you so mad? Like I didn't follow your rules because I wanted to do my own thing and try to earn my way to heaven, basically. Like I'm not I'm not obeying commands. I'm trying to go above and beyond your command by giving you the best cows, and we took the best women. There's no reason to slaughter a nice, hip, broad, you know what I mean? Like
Well,
we,
that's not really what the text says. He didn't. It says he kept the best cattle for himself, but according to the text, I mean, you're trying to argue Saul's case that he
but
had good
I think
intentions.
Saul said I think he told, didn't he tell Samuel that like, no, no, I'm sacrificing that to God. Why is he so mad?
Yeah, yeah, that
Yeah,
happened.
Yeah,
but that wasn't the command, and it was
no, I got
and
it, and that's
and
I am
and it
like,
was and it was quite obvious that this was a lie. Saul that wasn't Saul's motivation. He was doing it to
so again, what I'm saying is saying that it's a lesson in following and obeying commands. That doesn't mean that that command was given by God. But when you are given a
well,
command by God, you should follow it.
Well, so
okay.
And
it's
that was
Well, there's information that you might not have that might influence your reading of that text, which is that well, one, you know, the command to, you know, lay waste to everything and kill all, you know, men, women, and
and we talked
children
about
and
this before,
cattle.
and like the hyperbole of it, and
Well,
the
yeah, this was a common ancient idiom
yes,
I mean that it's comparable to what we do today when we, you know, a coach telling a football team, let's go out and kill them all. He
yeah, it
doesn't
was
literally
we
mean that,
discussed that all in the problem
right?
of evil. Look it up inside our like it was
And
that was
later
an episode.
on, and we read in the text that Saul wiped out all the Amalekites except for Agag, king of the Amalekites. And then a few chapters later, there are Amalekites showing up to menace the Israelites, which clearly means some got away or it didn't, it was
Or it didn't happen at
hyperbole.
all,
that's
right?
like episode
Well,
2
Yeah.
in the House of David, if everybody's watching that.
Oh, nice. I
good
do need to go
show.
check
That's
that
a
out.
good show.
Yeah.
But that's just an example off the top of my
Well,
But
head.
but
And
I don't want to take this
but a more important
off brand, but no, hang on, Brian. So to Dre's point of this, I mean, compare and contrast what he's saying with the story of Noah. Did Noah really get swallowed by a sea animal and then live in its belly for days and
Jonah,
then or
Jonah.
Jonah,
you
I'm
said
sorry. What did I say? Oh, I said Noah.
you said Noah. I'm like,
The
no,
story,
Noah didn't.
sorry.
Well, but
The story of
that's
Jonah.
that's apples and oranges though.
No, is it?
Yeah, I don't think Jonah is written as history.
You're not the you're certainly not the 100% majority on that.
I'm
There's plenty that believe it actually
I
happened.
am the 100% majority among actual Bible scholars.
I don't think so.
I will give you $100 if you can find a reputed like a an accredited Bible scholar who thinks that Jonah is history.
I don't know what the I don't you're inventing words. I don't know what that means. What's a reputed Bible scholar? One that you agree with?
No,
find a
we'll just find a Bible
PhD. Well,
scholar,
that's
like
it's kind of a dick thing to say, but
academic,
well,
academic.
but find somebody with a
And
doctorate.
I bring up scholars all the time too, because scholars say, and then Brian actually argues, scholars do not say that. I'm like, but they
Well,
did. Like the
but
source I'm reading is
well,
saying that the scholars
but
believe this.
Matt quoted consensus to argue against what I'm saying.
I
That
said
doesn't mean
100%. I'm saying
the consensus doesn't mean that I'm necessarily mean that I'm right, but
agreed.
I think you'll be hard pressed to find an actual Bible scholar, somebody with a doctorate in biblical in any kind of relevant field, who thinks that Jonah was written in
Or
the
any
genre.
serious published scholar. I don't even think you need to have that.
Right.
I agree with Brian
But the
here,
point
but
is, Jonah was not written in the genre of history. It's very clearly written as fiction, divinely inspired fiction.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
biblical. It like
Well,
it's
so
not.
what does that even mean?
did a dude actually wrestle God and put him in a freaking submission hold and only walk away with a limp? Did that really
Yeah,
happen?
yeah.
See, I don't think so.
Why?
I don't either.
I think that's just as metaphorical.
I'm pretty sure God was pulling some punches then, right?
Well, of
I
course.
don't reject Jonah as history because I reject that the miracle of a fish swallowing a man alive and the man dying and being raised by God is possible. I reject it because the literary cues within the book tell us as in effect that it was written as fiction. Like you don't have all the telltale signs of a historical book that say in the year of King so and so this happened. You don't. It's this kind of once upon a
A
time.
long time ago in a galaxy far,
It's
far
kind of like
away.
that. And the king of Nineveh isn't named. And the Nineveh was the capital city of Assyria, which was Israel's most bitter enemies. They were cruel, demon worshiping monsters. But the Nineveh being the capital of Assyria would mean that the king of Nineveh would be called the king of Assyria, and he typically be named. This is the king of Nineveh, and he does silly things like declare that everyone, including their livestock, has to repent in sackcloth and ashes, and then it happens. So like it's clearly meant to be humorous, hyperbolic. It's not to tell you about historical events that happened. It's an allegory about Israel's role in the world as God's prophet and mouthpiece. And they are a reluctant prophet who doesn't want to do their job because of their national pride, their ethnocentrism. They don't want other nations to repent because that would make them and be right with God because that would make them less special. That's the point of the book of Jonah. And it's not because I reject the miraculous nature of things that happen in Jonah. It's because of all of the cues within the literature itself. So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Meanwhile,
I buy that.
but to Dre, to your point, do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead?
Yes.
Okay. So you then believe that he's the Messiah.
What does that mean?
Well, it's very straightforward. I'm just
What is Messiah? What is it?
he's the promised chosen one who would be God, God's agent to redeem Israel and accomplish his purposes in the world for Israel, to be the
Uh,
fulfillment of the prophecies.
sure.
So you believe that he was divine and he spoke for God, basically.
Yes.
So when he says that do not think that I've come to abolish the law and the prophets, I'm not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law of the prophets until everything is fulfilled. Like, do you believe him? Do you trust that?
Yes. But what does that mean?
It means that he affirmed the divinely inspired, the divine authority of the Old Testament scriptures.
Of all the scripture or just law and not necessarily all the extra man-made laws that were done in Leviticus?
Well, he
And
said
we're diving into territory of why I'm not a Christian. That's what we're doing right now.
well,
So
but
are
this
we
is
doing this? Is that what we're doing?
well, but this is central to the question of doubt and like why do we believe what we believe and how do we know it's true?
Because there's
But when he says the law and the prophets,
right.
he's saying
No, you're putting that on his lips. Like I mean,
I
he
haven't
said
even
that,
finished
but what does that
I
mean?
haven't even finished my sentence. How do you know I'm putting it on his lips?
Well, go ahead. We'll finish then.
Well, this when he says the law and the prophets, and he also says the law, the prophets, and the writings in Luke, that's the Jews call the what we call the Old Testament, they call it the Tanakh. That's
I
a
know. You're right.
okay.
Go ahead.
This is for the benefit of the listeners.
Okay.
Tanakh is an acronym for Torah, Navim, Ketuvim, which is Hebrew for the law, the prophets, and the writings. So when Jesus affirmed the law and the prophets and the writings, or shorthand, law and the prophets, or shorthand, the law, the Torah, he's not affirming a certain set of rules given by Moses. He's affirming the literary unit of the Torah and the prophets and the writings. Like Jesus is affirming the divine authority of the scriptures. So, I mean, if you, you know, if so I recognize that there's a lot of stuff in the Old Testament that's very difficult to swallow according to a modern secular materialist worldview that we're all conditioned into just by the fact of being Americans and consuming the media and the education and indoctrination that comes with being an American citizen. I recognize that, and you know, I wouldn't even pretend to that I've never struggled with anything I found in the Old Testament. But what I don't struggle with is that Jesus rose from the dead. He is the Messiah. He's God in human form. And if he affirms the law and the prophets and the writings, then I can take it to the bank that the law and the prophets and the writings are of God and they are true. In what sense they are true, that that's a matter of discussion and debate. But that they are true, if I doubt that, I'm rejecting him. Because he is the consummation and fulfillment and embodiment of
I
the
think
of
that's
the
what I said. I because I said that the overall is true. Um, what did you just say there? In what sense they're true is is where my issue
okay.
lies. And that's
Well,
where the debate is. And it's not about doubt, it's about debate. It's about what is actually true. So it's I did say that. I that's why I said that the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, the narrative and the arc, and because I believe Jesus rose from the dead, is true. In what sense it's true, and what pieces should be emphasized and which ones aren't as important is up for debate. And to me, fundamentalist Christians I don't think they have it right. That's all.
I guess I would say even like I don't if a man died and was then raised from that death,
Hmm.
I don't understand how the question follows in what sense. Like it happened. Like
Well, that's not the part why I'm saying
no,
what
I'm
sense. I'm
but
saying what he said. In
but
what sense does he
that's
mean
the
that?
anchor that on which everything else revolves. Um,
I agree with that. Also, like
like
that's what we
I
were
mean,
saying earlier.
sure, yeah.
I mean, and I think, and
well, but
so
I'm
this
just
is
saying that
pointed at
the
Dre. Now this is pointed at Dre.
well, I want
Um,
to clarify this because I think it's important to like the resurrection of Jesus Christ is in a different category than everything else you find in the Bible.
Oh,
That's
okay. Yes.
like that is that's the anchor for everything else. If that happened, all of it's true. If that didn't happen, the whole thing collapses. Um, and so like I don't think it's a matter. So I mean, you have to evaluate that first and foremost because everything else hinges on that.
so so Brian, that's what I was trying to say. I was trying to say the first part of what you said. That's what I was trying to say.
Oh, well, I beat you to it.
No, you
So
didn't beat me to it. You browbeat me to say it. Um, if both of us, you and I, have more than once made the statement that from an apologetics point of view, the historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus is like key, right? Like I've gone so far as to say I don't listen to any more apologetics after that because I have what I need, right? And I'm good and I can move forward. You like to do all of the other parts also. Um, so what's interesting to me is Dre also agrees with that, right? So like if the three of us all collectively agree on the historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, this is now a conversation of nuance, right? It's not the same thing as saying, do you believe in God? Do you believe in this? Do you believe in that? Right? Um, Dre, I saw your facial expression when with what Brian said about if that's true, all of this is true, and if it's not, none of it is.
I don't buy that. That's not
I
true to me.
I know, and that's I could tell how you were receiving what Brian said. I would change it to say, if you believe that, Christianity is true. Right? All of this, because you just made a statement 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, about reservations about accuracies in the Bible as it's written, right? And I think that's a conversation that's separate, to say, if one believes that Jesus rose from the dead, the leap then to say, I then believe in every word in the Holy Bible as I'm holding this one here on my desk, that's a very different thing. That's a very different leap to make. Because now you're requiring that belief to say that I believe that God has controlled and shaped the behavior of every man that's touched the Bible. And
Wait, what?
what part of that was
The very last sentence, like you said a bunch of stuff, and then it seemed like a leap to, therefore God has controlled every man, the behavior of every man who's
That's what I
touched the
said.
Bible.
That's what I said.
That's how you're characterizing what I
No,
what I
not
said.
you. I'm just saying broadly. That's the general Christian belief that the Bible is the word of God, right?
Okay.
When people say that, and it is to the extent that it is. What I'm saying is the letter for letter accuracy of what we call the Bible, to believe that requires you to believe that God has shaped and controlled and managed every human that has a hand in the creation and curation of what we call the Bible.
And let me be clear, by the way.
Hey, okay.
I might
I got to circle back to what Matt
take
just
more
said.
issue with the rest of the New Testament post Gospels than I do with the Old Testament. We'll leave that. Because now we're saying, because we agree on this event that happened, and that's what hinges everything. But I think everything that goes to the more toward us timeline part of that is, the why, and what does it mean, and where does it and where do we go from here. I think the New Testament, I have issues there.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean that the event didn't happen, and it doesn't mean that it's not significant, and it doesn't mean that that's what Christianity is hinged on. But fundamental Christianity based on the New Testament, I'm not positive is correct.
Well, you're wording that in a way that is very unspecific, so that it's impossible to respond to.
Yeah, because we're gonna do probably 2 or 3 shows on that exact
He's
topic.
doing it on purpose so we don't dive into a rabbit hole.
No, I know that. I'm just observing that.
So I know we spent a lot of time on the Old Testament and what's true and what's not, and what's hyperbole and what's not.
And that's why I'm not pushing back harder upon it right now.
But my real issue with Christianity is the New Testament, not Jewishness.
It's good, because that's where Christianity happens.
Funny you say that. That's my issue.
Yeah.
All right.
Ryan, you want to circle back to what I said? Because I'm happy to have finished that conversation. I'm not trying to be like flippant or crazy about it either. Like for me, it's all I'm saying is this: like, there are substantial differences between the Masoretic and the Septuagint, right? There's things in there that matter. There's nuances just in, the use of Elohim, sons of God, that stuff that matter.
Yeah.
Right. And my feelings about the first chunk of Enoch, and that I believe that and Jubilees were in the Bible, and the Jews took it out because it was too heavy Jesus. Like, I believe that there's things that were man affected in our Bible. Some maybe unintentionally, maybe some that don't change anything, and it just are, and we just we're moving on, right? But but because I believe that that happened, I don't believe that God is supernaturally controlling what we hold and call the Bible.
I actually don't believe that either. And
Because to me, the Bible would be idolatry. If we believe that everything that we can only go to that spot, and that's the only thing that can inform
eh,
us of
I
what.
I got to address what Matt just said though. And
Okay,
I mean I don't agree that that would be idolatry, but um I don't think that it, and this is why I'm always, you guys get annoyed, or at least Matt gets annoyed when I harp on about the proper epistemology of Christianity. Um, I don't think God needs to have supernaturally controlled every single aspect of the transmission and preservation of the Bible. I think that our epistemologically, we should start by evaluating it on purely historiographical grounds. On those terms, we have more manuscript evidence for the New Testament being accurate and perfectly preserved, not supernaturally, but because there are so
sure,
many people
yeah,
making copies and they're being spread so far and wide that like we have this science, and it is a science of textual criticism by which we can compare and contrast all these different manuscripts
I don't
and
disagree with that.
reproduce the New Testament absolutely as it was written. And then you get to the question of, okay, well, now we have the New Testament absolutely as it was written. Who wrote it and why are we listening to them? And those
Right.
questions, they stand up too. I mean, every
So
writer of the New Testament was handpicked by Jesus or by a disciple of one of those handpicked representatives of Jesus. And so it's like you can trust, and even like I don't even want to say that because like if you read First Corinthians and you read it from a completely philosoph you read it as a hostile atheist, it's still the historical data that it includes is sufficient. You know, and assume let's just assume that Paul is a fraud. He somehow convinced the other apostles that he's for real, but he's not. Those dumb apostles, they were duped, but not us. We can see through him. He's a fraud. Even so, the historical data that exists in First Corinthians is enough to prove the truth of Christianity. And you know, and if you know if you evaluate the New Testament on those historiographical terms, first and foremost, and then you reason it out, you the problem with Christians that I think that both of you were talking about, Dre's got to look, and I want to investigate that in a minute. But the like I think the problems that you're talking about is that Christians tend to presuppose biblical inspiration and just leave it at that and go from
mhm,
there.
sure.
What I'm talking about is epistemologically speaking, don't presuppose that. Evaluate historiography according to its historical criteria. It stands up under every historiographical question we could ask it better than any
I
other ancient
so
writings. And that's the basis of our investigation. And then we thereby conclude that it's divinely inspired, it's the word of God, and it comes with God's authority. Like don't presuppose it, but you conclude it based on the evidence.
went to
That
the
makes
extent
sense.
I it does to the extent that you can. Like I said, I'm just as interested in some of the stuff from freaking 5,000 years ago that
But you
the
can,
historiological evidence is essentially non-existent.
well,
Like did Moses really exist? Like there's no historical
well,
proof of
okay,
Moses outside of the Bible.
but I'm talking about the New Testament.
No,
That's what I'm
I
talking about.
yeah, no, but I'm just but my point stands broadly across the whole thing, right?
Sure, but as I said before, if Jesus is the Messiah, if he's the one foretold in the Old Testament, then God raising him from, well, first of all, God raising him from the dead vindicates him as the Messiah.
I agree.
If God vindicates him as the Messiah in Jesus himself, I mean, the whole concept of the Messiah is rooted in the Old Testament
I agree.
scriptures.
Yeah.
Jesus himself affirmed the Old Testament scriptures.
Here's an easy slam dunk, right? And I'm going to say this, and I think all three of us have no problem with it. Because we all three believe in the concept and the reality of the resurrection of Jesus, and we believe in the divinity broadly, Trey, I'm going to use that to not get into a nit of Jesus, then we all collectively agree in every single red letter word written in the Bible. I think that's like an easy starting point to say this is where there's no, as such, it's beyond contestation.
Yeah. Otherwise,
right?
You don't believe in Jesus, and you cannot even be remotely Christian.
Right. So that's the
and if we can't say the red letters of Jesus is true, then what are we talking about?
Right. 100%.
So, when you say the red letters, that's
the words that are attributed coming out of Jesus' mouth.
Right.
Written down by his direct one-to-one disciple.
So
apostles.
Does that include all of the Gospels or just the parts in the Gospels where Jesus spoke?
Just the parts in the Gospels
just the part where Jesus spoke.
So why would
I'm just being hyper specific as a center point.
Yeah.
And then we can branch out from there.
And then from there, that probably happened. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that probably happened.
Yeah.
I'm
not suggesting if it's not read, I don't believe it, but I'm saying that's an easy point.
But that's a starting point to say that is 100% we can all agree.
Yeah.
And then from there is where the nuance starts.
Well, I'm just saying you can't really accept that, but then reject the line before it where the same author.
That's what Dre's saying is most likely all the connected words are also right. But it's the ones where the whole book has no red letters in it where it's like, okay, let's talk about that.
Especially the synoptics, right? Because they're kind of the same story with the same sources and the same. John's a little different. It's a different genre of writing even. So
that's a heck of a lot of doubt that we laid out on this show.
Yeah, and
how do you, if you can sum up in a very quick monologue, Brian, how would you thwart doubt? What's the high level, based on everything you just said for the last couple of hours? What are the takeaways?
Has it been a couple hours?
Yeah,
it
has. How would you sum up how Christians should deal with doubt?
It's a two-parter, 2 quick parts. I'll strive to make it, but well, like I said before, just to sum up what we've been talking about, Jesus Christ himself, how do you explain him apart from God's existence, apart from him being, his entire existence in history being a paranormal event, a supernatural event? There's no other way to account for him, especially the resurrection. That should tell us that whatever worldview we hold, that kind of leads to the second part, which is to people who question that, who scoff at that, those the atheists that I cited who ridicule what we believe. And I'll recognize that, the stuff about watchers and giants, that's strange credulity, but only within a certain worldview. So I would ask people, what do you really know about the nature of reality that you can be so confident about that paradigm as more credible than the biblical paradigm? What do you know that makes the existence of God implausible, or even the existence of angels and watchers and Nephilim? Do you have a worldview that's more credible than that you can stake your life on? Congress is holding hearings about otherworldly craft that intelligent, sober-minded professionals flying fighter jets and and other aircraft are reporting. We don't know what's going on. We don't know we don't know why we're here. We don't know how life started. We don't know why there's something rather than nothing. It's all a great big mystery, and the only leads we have to an explanation are in the Bible. If you've got better leads, I'm all ears. But as it stands, Western civilization, we have this kind of there's this thing called normalcy bias that tells us that if it falls outside of our regular daily experience, or something that you could normally expect to see on the news, it's just not true. Um, but normalcy bias is it's pretty limited in scope. When you think about how profoundly human civilization has changed over the past 50 years, still more in the past 100 years, still more in the past 2,000 years, there's no such thing as normalcy. I mean, like, human civilization is constantly in flux. We're constantly learning new things, and our view of the universe is constantly being totally upended. And everything we've learned since the Enlightenment and on has only confirmed the Bible. Um, so our best lead for understanding what life even is the resurrection of Jesus Christ and the Bible that this affirmed. And so,
My wife was taught a phrase, normal is a setting on your washing machine.
yeah, um, that sounds very folksy and quaint, but it's actually kind of profound. Like,
Yeah.
that's um, the fact that the three of us are sitting here talking to each other over, you know, thousands of miles removed. Um, uh, that was unthinkable 2,000 years ago when the book of Revelation was written, and it talked about the two witnesses in Jerusalem who would be slain by the beast, and then
Everyone knows that QR codes are the sign. So
well,
the Revelation
but
foretold what we're doing right now.
but seriously, you've got these two. It says that the whole world would look on their slain bodies for 3 days and 3 nights. Um, 2,000 years ago, nobody understood what that meant. Now it like it we
Everybody's like,
almost
"Oh, okay.
we,
Yeah.
we almost miss how weird that is, that that's in there, because we do that all the time. Like,
Yeah.
of course, why wouldn't we be able to live stream that for 3 days and 3 nights? Um,
The
and that
whole
just goes
world
to
saw the new pope be elected, right? Like,
yeah.
or announced, I guess, not elected, but
That that answer was not short, nor
I award you no
I would
points.
I would say that it is complete. What do you do personally, Brian, when doubt creeps into you? It's kind of a better way to ask that question. What is a quick, like, could you like in 30 seconds, could you
Well,
say what it is?
all this stuff I just said,
Right.
that
Okay.
I mean,
you actually contemplate all of
I'm
that.
sorry, was that
You
too
run
short?
that
Was
you
that
run
too
that
short an
mon
answer,
you
Dre?
run that exact monologue in your head whenever doubt creeps in,
It,
and you get on your knees at night.
Dre's normalcy bias didn't allow him to accept that answer.
I well, I
Oh,
think it way faster than I say it.
oh, I see. Matt, do you have a technique? Is there
No,
something that
because
keeps Matt
I,
from flying
yeah,
off the
yeah.
reservation?
I mean, mine's actually a lot more simple. I recenter myself on why I believe, and the cool thing is,
That's what I
and
just said.
I, yeah,
It
but
is actually.
yeah, but mine's more simple, right? Because I don't ever find myself in this like ontological or metaphysical question of God. Like that, just that's not the way that my doubt happens. My doubt is what we were just talking about, right? I'm like, why isn't Enoch in the Bible if it used to be? I really think it was. And how did it get taken out? And why does nobody care? Or why are there why
Matt's
are
that
there
meme
six
with
other
the wife
books?
is laying in bed. So talking about, I
Yeah.
bet he's thinking about girls right now. Why isn't Enoch in
Yeah, that's
this?
exactly that's some real that's real shit right there. Like, I mean, the six other books in
What?
the Catholic Bible. Why does nobody make a big freaking deal about that? Because first of all, as a saved round, Brian, it absolutely was Martin Luther that took it out, and he used the argument of it not being in the Masoretic versus the Septuagint, but they don't like no one likes to use that phrasing because it sounds like he took books out of the Bible and he wasn't authorized to do it. But I mean, this was the Bible, this is the new Bible, it's got 6 books missing. Like that happened and nobody talks about it. Catholics don't talk about it, Protestants don't talk about it, and it's shocking to me.
Do you want to litigate this now, or do you want to?
No, we can litigate it offline or on our next in another show, but like I've been Googling it and looking at it and like, what's the
Canon
argument
show,
for why
the
it
Canon
happened?
episode.
And it was Martin Luther that did it. So
All of our listeners, please Google this, because
go ahead.
Matt's wrong.
Go ahead. And
I'm
then my other saved round real quick is I've got 2 names, Gleason Archer, PhD Bible scholar, and the other guy's name is
Here we go. Find me a credible scholar.
yeah,
Matt's like,
he has a direct
challenge
quote
accepted.
in the Encyclopedia of Bible Difficulties. And the quote is, if Jesus accepted Jonah's experience as historical, so must we if we accept Jesus's authority and truthfulness, end quote. So, I mean, there's people out there that
what's his degree in?
Let's
Signals
see.
intelligence.
He has where'd it go? Hang on.
And from what institution?
Hang on.
Also now
And
we're
And I
That's fine.
dispute
now
and
we're a
I-
credentialist, Brian. That's what we are now.
and I dispute that Jesus affirmed it as historical.
That's a different issue. The guy he had a PhD in classics from Harvard, a law degree from Harvard, a Bachelor of Divinity from Princeton. He was a noted polyglot, proficient in Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, and Arabic, taught at the Fuller Theological Seminary and later at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School.
Well, let
I
me
would
put
say
it.
he's-
Let me.
I
Put
think
it
he's
this
got the
way.
creds.
Let me put it this way. I'll bet I could find the same proportion of geologists who think the Earth is flat as you can find
It's okay.
of Bible scholars who
$100
think
in my
Jonah
hand.
was historical.
$100. I'll see you on Friday.
I mean,
Little man, put that
get,
shit in my hand.
I guess you technically fulfilled the terms of the bet. So
In space.
Listeners, what do you
So I-
think? Does
so
Brian
I-
owe Matthew
no,
$100?
I'm conceding that I should have qualified the bet better.
You should have.
To make my point,
I made
for
a
sure.
dick move and asked you to qualify it better.
I'll give you the $100.
I don't.
but-
I actually don't want the money. I
But-
prefer this. I prefer this over the $100.
The win.
But I would still contend that I could find the same proportion of people with PhDs in geology who think the Earth is flat
I'm sure.
as you can
I'm sure.
find. So it's a fringe position. It's just that's my point.
I didn't suggest it wasn't a fringe position. That's why I was really careful when I said 100% of people wouldn't agree with you. I learned that from Joe Rogan's lunar landing conversation with Matt Walsh. Because Matt goes, "Do you believe that?" And Joe goes, "I think there's less than. It's not likely that it's 100% not true or something like that." And I was like, "Oh, look at Joe with the weasel."
You said 100% of people would disagree with me.
no.
That's
I
not
said,
what he said.
I said not 100%.
And we can rewind the tape
Yeah.
because it's recorded.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was
But-
careful
Well-
with how I said it purposefully.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's fine. I heard what I heard is 100% of people will agree with you. That's
Oh,
that's
no.
that's
God,
that's what
no.
exists in my head, and that's probably
that's fair.
what colored
That's fair.
the way that I. But yeah, I think 100% of evangelicals probably agree. Probably.
Well, this guy's an
disagree with me.
evangelical for sure. Yeah. Yeah. This guy he's a known, in fact, his whole gimmick was he was crazy about inerrancy, which is why he would take such a stance.
Exactly why.
I had to go find the guy I was looking for, but I know
Now,
those guys exist.
I do want to clarify this. You guys will roll your eyes and be bored, but for the sake of the listeners, whenever I dispute inerrancy, people always think that I'm attacking the Bible, and that it turns them feral. I afford the Bible as much authority as anyone you know. It's not predicated on its inerrancy. It's predicated on its divine inspiration, which is not the same thing as inerrancy. So like I have Matt and Dre can attest to this. I have a very high view of the Bible. I think most people who listen to the show understand that that's the case, that I revere the Bible. It's the word of God. You know, a lot of our fights with, you know, between me and Matt and Dre is I might perceive from 1,000 yards off that they might be maybe thinking bad things about the Bible, and I turn Raven and Farrell against them because of that. So I get it when people get mad when I
It's true.
dispute
All of it's true.
all this. I get it when people get mad when I dispute inerrancy. It's misguided. Um,
No,
so
I agree with everything you're saying. I think that the concept of inerrancy in the way that Christians typically espouse it or understand it is as dangerous or more dangerous than Calvinism. But it's in the same space because it leads to doubt, which leads to confusion, which leads to the dark side.
yeah, it sets this all or nothing standard
Mhm.
for the
Turns you
Bible
Sith.
that it doesn't,
Yeah.
Anger.
And only Sith deal in absolutes.
That's right.
which hate you. This is like this is like a you like this is like a loop that you like you poke me with that stick and then I have to explain that that only a Sith deals in absolutes is an absolute,
Oh yeah,
which
for
makes the
sure.
person saying it and then it just
Yep.
I get tired and you
So
just
this is what's known on the interwebs, Brian, as rage bait.
yeah, which is why I know you're doing it and I hate you for it.
You're welcome.
So yeah,
I love you, man. No homo.
I think
Did we solve doubt?
I
We
think
certainly did not.
I think doubt. I mean, I think you have to ask yourself what does doubt like mean to you, and what part are you doubting? And if you do doubt that part, does it unravel all of your faith?
Mhm.
Or does it change your view of soteriology?
Look at Dre with the big words.
Because if it does, then that's legitimate doubt that will take away faith. If it if it does or it doesn't, I don't even remember which angle I took, but like then if it's B, then
I
just play with that. You know, you, learn to pray often. It doesn't have to be elaborate, but it should be often. And if you can set with something before you go to bed or can put it into your subconscious to really think about and really pray and seek those answers, the answers will come to you. It might take you 10 years, right? But the answers will come. And then you will find some peace. But really to thwart doubt, my answer is to pray about it with a sincere and humble and repentant heart, because that's the only way that God will hear you through the Holy Spirit. That's my take. Like,
I like it,
Yeah.
Dre. I would augment that with um you know, the whole thing about, you know, what are you looking for? I think that's a relevant part of this because as the modern rabbi Adam Lambert, you know, is quoted as, "What do you want from me?" Like, what are we trying to get out of this thing, right? Like when that doubt creeps in.
Are you talking about the American Idol guy?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay,
Um,
go ahead.
the
Sorry.
song's been stuck in my head
or
this whole
or
show.
or the Notebook. What do you want? What do you want?
Yeah, but the song's been stuck in my head because it's like people get into these weird places and they need like all of these perfect little lines to appear for them to feel okay and comfortable. But is that really what you're trying to get out of this? Or are you trying to understand what it is that you're supposed to get from it, right? And there's a difference there. There's a difference between going to the Bible to find God or versus going to the Bible to confirm a bias that you brought with you that you need so that God meets your expectations and then you can be satisfied with what it is that God's trying to say to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like
I think so.
it's a matter of, are you coming to God, or are you
what-
trying to bring it to you, right?
What
Like,
you mean is exegesis versus eisegesis.
yeah, but I'm
it's-
trying
it's
to
a-
use,
But it's a more personal,
yeah,
practical way of saying that.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly what, to me,
Yeah.
this whole thing's about. And I think that's how you, I don't want to say
And-
solve it because that's stupid, but that's the way out of the loop.
And to add to that, which I've already said this, but it's a good capstone, and I actually agree with both of you absolutely.
We're almost done.
Uh,
Don't.
But as you're praying about this, your doubt, pray to who God is, because you can know who God is through Jesus Christ. You can never wrap your head around what God
Yeah.
is.
I think it's good. And stop, like, who tries to figure that out? Knock it off. You're not that smart. You're not that smart,
just-
guy. You're not that
I
guy.
know.
You're not that guy.
and just understand that none of us are perfect, and we have an active mind that goes all over the place with tons of distractions and plenty of YouTube assholes that tell you this or that, to include us, right? So of course you doubt. Of course you do. So in the very beginning, when you hear the word doubt, you're like, not me. I'm like, I know. No, no, you don't. No, you don't.
And also, there is an enemy out there.
So so
I mean,
so stand up and fight. And the way to fight is to surrender. But you don't surrender to the enemy, you surrender to God.
That's deep too, Dre.
And he will take up that sword for you. But he won't take up that sword if you don't come to him with a humble and repentant heart.
dude, you sound like a Christian.
Maybe
A lot.
I sound like a someone who follows Jesus. That's what I sound like.
Because those two are so mutually opposed concepts. You're Christian.
In-
No, I follow
in-
Jesus.
In my mind, they are. So it's so anything else?
I'm good. We're three of us are in too much agreement to say another word.
Well, in that case,
The next word's
I-
going to be a fight.
I will say, stay curious, stay enlightened, and for God's sake, love each other. And I'll see you next week. God
Like
bless.
that. It's a good closing.